Lagos buzzed with life as the sun rose over the city's skyline. The central bank, a fortress of glass and steel, stood proudly in the heart of it all. Inside, Adaora, the bank manager, moved with purpose. Her sharp eyes scanned the bustling floor, ensuring everything was running smoothly. Across town, in a dimly lit room filled with cigarette smoke and the hum of a small fan, 4 men huddled around a table. Blueprints of the bank lay sprawled out, along with surveillance photos and notes. Kwame, the leader, stood at the head, his presence commanding attention. "All right, listen up," Kwame began, his voice steady. "We've planned this down to the last second. Bayo, you take care of the security systems. Chidi, you're our muscle. Io, you charm the staff and keep everyone calm. I'll handle the vault. Remember, we get in, get the money, and get out. No unnecessary risks." Bayo, the tech expert, adjusted his glasses and nodded. "I've got the security feed loop ready. We'll be invisible." Chidi, the muscle, cracked his knuckles, a grin spreading across his face. "Can't wait to smash through those guards." Io, the charmer, leaned back, a confident smile playing on his lips. Piece of cake. The next morning, the heist began. Dressed as security personnel, the thieves slipped into the bank. Bayo headed to the control room, his fingers flying over the keyboard as he disabled the security systems. Chidi and Io moved through the lobby, controlling the crowd with a mix of charm and intimidation. Kwame advanced towards the vault with a determined stride. Everything went smoothly at first. The vault door yielded to Kwame's expertise, revealing stacks of cash. But then, a security guard stumbled upon Bayo in the control room. A scuffle broke out, and the guard managed to trigger an alarm before Bayo subdued him. Panic spread like wildfire through the bank. Patrons screamed, and employees ducked behind desks. Kwame's plan began to unravel. In the chaos, they realized they needed leverage to ensure their escape. Adaora, calm and composed despite the pandemonium, caught Kwame's eye. "Grab her," Kwame ordered, pointing to Adaora. "We need a hostage." Io moved swiftly, his grip firm but not rough as he pulled Adaora towards the exit. "Stay quiet, and you won't get hurt," he whispered, his voice laced with a mix of urgency and regret. Adaora nodded, her mind racing. She knew she had to remain calm and observant if she wanted to survive this ordeal. As they exited the bank, the thieves shoved her into a van and sped away from the city. The van hurtled down deserted roads, the atmosphere inside tense and silent. Adaora sat in the back, her eyes wide with fear, but her mind sharp and calculating. She watched the thieves, noting their interactions and behaviors. Kwame's authority was clear, but there was something different about Io. He seemed conflicted, his eyes betraying a hint of concern. Hours later, they arrived at a secluded cabin deep in the forest. The thieves unloaded their loot and ushered Adaora inside. The cabin was rustic but secure, a perfect hideout. Kwame paced the room, formulating their next move while Bayo set up a temporary surveillance system. "Io, you watch her," Kwame commanded, pointing to Adaora. "Make sure she doesn't try anything." Io nodded, taking a seat near Adaora. She met his gaze, her expression a mix of defiance and fear. "What do you plan to do with me?" she asked, her voice steady. Io hesitated before responding. "We just need to keep you until we're sure we're safe. Then we'll let you go." Adaora nodded, accepting his answer for now. She knew she had to bide her time and find a way out of this situation. The perfect plan had turned into a high-stakes game of survival, and she was determined to come out on top. The secluded cabin in the forest was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and distant chirping of birds. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Kwame, Bayo, Chidi, and Io were counting their loot, while Adaora sat tied to a chair, observing them with keen eyes. Io had been tasked with watching her, and he couldn't help but notice her composure. Despite the fear in her eyes, she didn't panic or plead. She was strong, intelligent, and surprisingly calm for someone in her situation. "You're surprisingly calm for someone who's been kidnapped," Io remarked one evening, handing her a bottle of water. Adaora took it cautiously, her eyes never leaving his. "Panic doesn't help anyone. Besides, I have a feeling you're not all bad." Io chuckled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Don't be so sure. We're thieves, after all." Days turned into weeks, and the tension among the thieves grew. Kwame insisted on keeping Adaora as leverage, but the others were growing uneasy. The longer she stayed, the greater the risk of being caught. Bayo, always practical, voiced his concerns. "We can't keep her here forever, Kwame. The longer she's with us, the higher the chance we'll slip up." Chidi nodded in agreement. "She's smart. She's been watching us. We should just let her go and disappear." Kwame frowned, deep in thought. "Fine. We'll release her, but we need to make sure she doesn't go straight to the police." Io volunteered to handle it. He had grown fond of Adaora and didn't trust anyone else to ensure her safety. They drove her to a remote forest road, where Io untied her and handed her a map. "You'll find your way back to the city from here," Io said, his voice soft. "Stay safe." Adaora hesitated for a moment, looking back at Io. She nodded, then turned and walked away, her steps steady and determined. Io watched her disappear into the trees, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over him. But he couldn't just leave her. Io followed her from a distance, a silent guardian. He made sure she didn't get lost or run into danger. Adaora, though scared, sensed she wasn't alone. She resumed her life with caution, but the experience had changed her. Back in the city, Adaora returned to her duties at the bank. She was stronger, more vigilant. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, but she didn't let it paralyze her. She had survived the heist. She could survive anything. One evening, as Adaora walked home, she felt a presence. Turning quickly, she caught a glimpse of a familiar face in the shadows. Her heart raced, but she kept her composure. She knew it was Io. He had been following her, protecting her from afar. Adaora decided she couldn't live like this. She needed answers. She needed to confront her silent guardian and find out why he was still watching over her. Adaora couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time she turned a corner or walked down a quiet street, she felt eyes on her. It was unsettling, yet strangely comforting. She knew who it was, but she needed to be sure. She decided to set a trap. One evening, as she left the bank, she took a different route home, one that led through a quieter part of the city. She walked quickly, glancing over her shoulder occasionally. She noticed a shadowy figure following her, keeping a safe distance. Her heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't let fear take over. She turned into an alley, then abruptly doubled back, stepping into the shadows to wait. Minutes later, Io appeared at the mouth of the alley, looking around cautiously. Adaora stepped out, her voice steady but demanding. "Why are you following me?" Io froze, then sighed, stepping into the light. "I had to make sure you were safe. The others. They would have hurt you." Adaora's eyes widened. "You're one of them. You're one of the thieves." "Yes," Io admitted, guilt washing over him. "But I couldn't let them hurt you." Adaora's mind raced. She should turn him in, but he had saved her, protected her. "Why didn't you just leave me alone? Why follow me?" Io looked away, struggling with his emotions. "I don't know. I guess I felt responsible. And I couldn't just walk away knowing you might be in danger." Adaora studied him, her anger softening. She could see the conflict in his eyes. He was torn between his loyalty to his crew and his growing feelings for her. "You should leave. If they find out you're here, they'll come for you." Io shook his head. "I can't. I need to make sure you're safe." Their conversation was cut short by the sound of approaching footsteps. Io's eyes widened in alarm. "We need to go. Now." They moved quickly, slipping through the alleys and back streets. Adaora's heart raced as they ran, her mind struggling to keep up with the events unfolding around her. She had never expected to find herself in this situation, running through the city with one of her captors. They reached a small, abandoned building and slipped inside. Io barred the door, then turned to Adaora. "We're safe here, for now." Adaora sank to the floor, her mind reeling. She looked up at Io, her eyes filled with questions. "What now?" Io sat down beside her, his expression troubled. "We wait. I need to figure out how to deal with the others. They won't stop until they find us." Adaora nodded, trying to process everything. She felt a strange sense of trust towards Io, despite everything that had happened. "Thank you," she said softly, "for protecting me." Io smiled, a sad, weary smile. "I just hope it's enough." The night passed slowly, tension hanging heavy in the air. Adaora couldn't sleep, her mind too full of questions and fears. Io kept watch, his eyes never leaving the door. He knew they were in danger, but he also knew he had to protect Adaora at all costs. As dawn approached, Io turned to Adaora. "We need to move. It's not safe here." Adaora nodded, her resolve hardening. She would face whatever came next with strength and courage. She had survived this long, and she wasn't about to give up now. The other thieves were relentless. Kwame, Chidi, and Bayo had tracked Io down, determined to silence him and Adaora. They couldn't afford any loose ends. The city had become a dangerous place, filled with shadows and secrets. Io and Adaora moved from one hiding place to another, always staying one step ahead of their pursuers. They grew closer, their shared danger forging a bond between them. Adaora could see the strain in Io's eyes, the weight of his guilt and fear. One night, as they hid in an abandoned warehouse, Adaora confronted Io. "Why did you really follow me? You could have disappeared, started a new life." Io sighed, his shoulders slumping. "I couldn't. Not after everything we did. Not after meeting you." Adaora's heart ached for him. She could see his torment, his struggle to reconcile his past actions with his desire to do the right thing. "You don't have to protect me anymore. We can go to the police, end this." Io shook his head. "They won't believe us. Kwame, Chidi, and Bayo have too much influence. We need to find a way to expose them." Adaora nodded, determination in her eyes. "Then we'll do it together." Their plan was risky, but it was their only hope. They gathered evidence, documenting everything they knew about the heist and the thieves' activities. Adaora used her contacts at the bank to gather additional information, while Io kept watch. One day, as Adaora returned from a meeting with a trusted friend, she noticed a familiar figure lurking in the shadows. Her heart raced as she realized it was Chidi. She quickly changed direction, hoping to lose him in the crowded streets. But Chidi was persistent. He followed her, closing the distance with alarming speed. Adaora's mind raced. She needed to warn Io, but she couldn't lead Chidi back to their hideout. In a desperate move, she ducked into a busy market, weaving through the stalls and vendors. She spotted a narrow alley and darted into it, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She knew she couldn't outrun Chidi for long. Suddenly, strong hands grabbed her from behind. Adaora screamed, but the sound was quickly muffled. She struggled, but her captor's grip was too strong. "Found you," Chidi's voice growled in her ear. "Let's see if your friend comes to save you." Adaora's mind raced as she was dragged back to the thieves' hideout. She knew Io would come for her, but she feared what would happen when he did. The other thieves were ruthless, and they wouldn't hesitate to kill them both. Back at the hideout, Io's heart sank when he realized Adaora was missing. He knew something was wrong. He quickly gathered their evidence and prepared to confront the other thieves. He couldn't let them harm Adaora. The confrontation was inevitable. Io knew he couldn't avoid it any longer. He arrived at the thieves' hideout, his heart pounding with fear and determination. He had to save Adaora, no matter the cost. As he approached the building, he heard voices inside. Kwame's authoritative tone, Chidi's menacing growl, and Bayo's calculating calm. And then, Adaora's voice, steady and defiant despite her fear. "You won't get away with this," Adaora said, her voice strong. "Io will come for me." Kwame laughed, a cold, harsh sound. "We'll see about that." Io took a deep breath and stepped inside. "Let her go." The room fell silent as the thieves turned to face him. Kwame's eyes narrowed, and Chidi cracked his knuckles, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "So, you finally showed up," Kwame said, his voice laced with contempt. "I always knew you were weak." Io stood his ground, his eyes fixed on Adaora. "This ends now. Let her go, and we'll walk away." Kwame shook his head. "It's too late for that. You betrayed us, Io. And now you'll pay the price." The room exploded into chaos. Chidi lunged at Io, his fists swinging with brutal force. Io dodged, his reflexes honed from years of street fighting. He knew he couldn't win through strength alone, he had to be smart. Adaora watched in horror as the fight unfolded. She knew she couldn't just sit there. She grabbed a nearby lamp and smashed it against Chidi's head, giving Io the opening he needed. Io didn't waste a second. He tackled Chidi to the ground, landing a series of precise blows that left the big man dazed. Bayo moved to intervene, but Io was faster. He swept Bayo's legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the floor. Kwame watched, his face twisted with rage. "You're a fool, Io. You think you can save her? You think you can save yourself?" Io stood over the fallen thieves, his chest heaving with exertion. "It's over, Kwame. Surrender now, or this will end badly for you." Kwame sneered. "You think you've won? You're just as guilty as we are. You'll go down with us." Adaora stepped forward, her voice calm and commanding. "No, he won't. We have evidence. We can expose everything." Kwame's eyes widened in realization. "You planned this." Io nodded. "It's time to end this, Kwame. It's over." Kwame's shoulders sagged in defeat. He knew he was beaten. The police arrived moments later, their sirens filling the air. Io and Adaora handed over the evidence, ensuring the thieves would face justice. In the aftermath, Io turned himself in, confessing to his part in the heist. Adaora kept her promise, testifying on his behalf and highlighting his change of heart and efforts to protect her. The court showed leniency, recognizing his actions. A year later, Adaora had moved on, stronger and more resilient. She visited Io in prison, where they shared a moment of understanding and unresolved affection. "You did the right thing," Adaora said softly. Io smiled, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. "Thank you, Adaora, for everything." They parted with a promise of hope for the future, leaving the possibility of a new beginning open. The heart of the heist had brought them together, and their lives were forever changed by the choices they made. Please like and subscribe. It may look simple for you, but for us it's very valuable and it keeps us pushing to provide more interesting stories and tales, not just for your entertainment, but also for new experiences in life, to tackle new encounters. Thanks so much for your support.